Welcome to Literacy RX, brought to you by SpeechMED. Hosted by Dr. David Lee Scher, this Literacy RX podcast will facilitate insightful discussions with influential health executives on the newest trends in digital health, the crucial issue of health equity, and the powerful impact of language and literacy on patient outcomes. Subscribe and join us as we delve into exploring how to create healthier and more inclusive communities.
Well, welcome everyone, and to the Literacy RX podcast. My name is David Scher, and we are very pleased to have Soojin Jun, who is going to tell us about her and get into health literacy. We're very honored to have you as a guest today, and without further ado, let's start. So, as an introduction, I'd love for you to tell our audience your story and professional background for us.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I'm a pharmacist by profession, but I identify myself more as a patient safety activist. That means we advocate for patient safety, and I have co-founders for the organization we have co-founded. It's called Patients for Patient Safety US. All of us have experienced medical harm, either directly or indirectly. And we want to make sure that all healthcare organizations put patient safety as a priority, including digital health area. That's what I do now. Before I became a pharmacist, I was a videographer and mom.
Wow.
Well, and daughter. Yeah, as her caregiver, and I was a caregiver for my father, and he was a foreigner from South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And his journey as a patient and me as a caregiver were the reasons how I became a pharmacist after he passed away due to medication adverse events.
Oh, interesting. Wow. So tell us more about that, if you're able to.
Sure. So my father was a businessman, no healthcare background, and I know this is a literacy podcast, so of course he wasn't very familiar with healthcare in general, but also the environment that he will be taking care in the United States. And the culture of healthcare is very different from South Korea compared to the United States. And in South Korea, a lot of medical procedures and diagnostic imaging, and those are all covered by universal health care. And there are supplemental health care options, but compared to here, there's more national coverage. And when he was diagnosed with cancer as a foreigner, he luckily he had an emergency insurance that he could use, but if he didn't have that, it would have been unimaginable amount of money that we would have owed.
Sure.
So his journey started as a cancer patient. He was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes as a either complication, or it could have been from side effects from the medications. We don't know. But what killed him was not cancer. It was side effects from the insulin. And of course, I wasn't in healthcare, and he was not either. And we suffered because, one, we trusted healthcare 100%, even maybe more than 100%. And as an advocate and an activist, that's something that we tell patients not to do, because our healthcare in the United States is very complex. If you trust it 100% with all those stakeholders in healthcare that will be taking care of patients, you will suffer, guaranteed. So it's a balance of trust that we advocate for patients to be able to voice their concerns when there is a concern. But anyhow, from that point on, we experienced many gaps, of course, and he was in hospital for G2 placement, transferred to nursing home, and then he was transferred to our home because he couldn't afford anymore stay at nursing home. It was very expensive. It was about $10,000 a month. At that time, this was 2006 and
Wow.
7. So we couldn't afford any more of the cost. So he came home. I was given 20 different medications to give, and 5 times he had to be tested because he was in sliding scale insulin. And if you kind of think about it, he had esophageal cancer, so he couldn't eat very properly. He was relying on G-tube food, the food that goes to the G-tube. And he was placed on insulin and sliding scale. Right there, that's a red flag. But none of this was communicated to us, and I didn't even know what diabetes was. And between the transitions, there were really no interventions per se. There were people who would come to my home. There was a visiting nurse, but all she did was just give me the instruction what to do at what time. Give this, give that. There was no education on the relationship of food, diabetes, and insulin.
Hmm.
So I gave as instructed, and his blood glucose was all over the place because number one, esophageal cancer is very well known to have erratic glucose, which I did not know either. And because he was relying on those G2 food that it was very unpredictable.
Hmm.
So if you think about it, and he was not a good water drinker, to second that. So when his sugar goes up, I would give a high dose of insulin, and he would crash like right away because it was not a true reading. And we did the same thing 2 weeks later. They will restore the glucose at ER and discharge him without really explaining what happened, how to prevent if something like this would have happened. And of course, there's a glucagon that we could give. Nothing like that was given. So we repeated this same thing. And when we approached the primary care doctor, he said this can happen when you're on insulin. He did not want to really see him. So he was very distressed, wanted to go back to South Korea to get care. And we booked our flight, all of us, all of our family members. And he said, this was my gift to you. And of course, he couldn't go by himself. So, and we were all ready to go. And 1 week before our flight, he passed away.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So, he had very severe abdominal pain at the time. Yeah.
Well, that's a very vivid example, and I have this expression that if it happens somewhere, it's happening everywhere because there's nothing super special about what kind of diagnosis or care that he had. Tell us on a different light, excuse me, how you experience the importance of health literacy as a pharmacist.
Yeah, so when we dispense medication, there are tons of information that we give out to patients. There's really, in a busy environment in a pharmacy, there's no time to really go over all the information. And of course, we give leaflets of information that no one really reads. Of course, and then those informations are also available online as well nowadays. So people will look up information that way as well. But just there's no really
Mm.
filter that can guide patients in a correct way, because every situation for that patient is different. There's just because it applies to one person, it doesn't necessarily
Mhm.
apply to
Sure,
another.
sure.
There's a pharmacodynamic aspect of
Excuse
the
me.
medication. Um, and pharmacokinetic wise, that's also different person to person
Now,
and race to
what
race.
does that mean for the lay audience?
Oh, sure. So pharmacokinetic is how how the drug is processed and when it goes into your body. And pharmacodynamic means how the body processes um, the interaction between the body and the drug.
So, for
So,
example, the same adult given one dose, if he or she is 4 feet 10, is going to be a lot different than if it's a professional football player.
right. That's like a great example to say. Yeah. So, there are different aspects how the drug gets processed in the body, and we give information about those, but that doesn't mean it applies to everybody the same way. And there's, of course, interaction with food, interaction with supplements that you're taking over the counter. So there's a lot of different ways that same drugs can affect people differently. So um, it's a challenge in a busy environment in pharmacy. And of course, doctor's office can give that information, but doctor's office is busy as well. So we have this busyness in healthcare that
That
don't
has
take
nothing
the
to do with the
time.
patient.
Yeah,
And I've
Yeah,
experienced that
it is a
myself.
challenge. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, SpeechMed was developed for this sole purpose of hopefully preventing episodes that your dad experienced with regards to communication, um, uh, not errors, but the flow of information and how people absorb it. How do you see in your own practice the potential utility of having a speech med technology which translates patients' information, or do you have that capability now?
Not right now, no. Where I practice, really, a lot of it is telephonic, and I think SpeechMed will work best, possibly in hospital setting when the verbal information is very important for patients to understand. Of course, it can be used like in pharmacy as well when patients get the leaflet, then there's no ways to get the information verbally. If you kind of think about it, many pharmacies don't necessarily provide interpreters in an
Right.
accessible way. So
What
I think
about like
that's
the minute, not minute, that's a proprietary thing, but clinical nurses, in the pharmacy that are really acting as primary care providers. I mean, I can see certainly a role in that setting as well.
yeah. I mean, I think anywhere where patients are, it can be helpful because I think there's an assumption that if you just do it this way, everything will go the way it should, right? But
Because
when
it's
it
the way
comes
we've always done it.
right, and if you kind of think about it, patients with language barriers, in my opinion, they're guaranteed to fall in the cracks. 100%, maybe more than 100%. And we have this assumption is very dangerous because we don't necessarily think about the hurdles that these people have to go through and the nuances of culture and other aspects of family relationships and psychological safety. As you know, a lot of times these people are minority patients, and there's a psychological safety aspect that we don't necessarily think about. And I used to get rolled eyes from executives when I mentioned when I advocate for these patients with language barriers, because if they may think, I don't know, I haven't gone further to
Right.
say, why did you do that? But I think part of it is that it's this talk again, right? Like I don't know what else to do, like other than providing interpreter. Um, is what I got from those kind of interactions. This is like 10, 15 years ago. Um, but I think now it's has been changed with more emphasis on health equity after COVID-19 and patient safety. So I am hopeful that there is more interest in health literacy and care for patients with language barriers.
Just to address health literacy in a more complete fashion. So there are patients that speak English that
Mhm.
are not health literate, and the
Right.
definition of health literacy is the ability to absorb the information, to process it, and to know it so well that you can make decisions based on that, and know it so well that you can actually explain it to someone else. So health literacy is not necessarily related to language preference, but to an understanding level of what's going on. And so even people that have English as their native language in this country certainly may not be health literate. And there are people that are illiterate that cannot read. So those instructions or information that you give them about the medication really are not for everyone that can understand it. So health literacy obviously goes beyond the language issue, and so it's a broader issue than just that. Tell us about your Patients for Patient Safety organization.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, we personally have experienced medical harm, either ourselves or through our loved ones. So some of us have lost their children, um, and some are living, with disability because of the medical error.
Wow.
And some of us experienced multiple medical errors for different family members. So it's you know, I think we heal as we help other patients. Um, but
How do you help other patients? I get the support group aspect of it, but is there a mission that goes beyond that?
yeah, so we advocate for patients at policy level.
Oh, great.
So we work with government agencies like CMS, HRQ, um, of course, and we are under the umbrella of World Health Organization.
Oh,
So
wow. Excellent.
yeah, so I have share my story um, in World Health Organization's webinar um, last year.
Excellent.
So, um, this is a global problem, global
Sure.
issues. And as our world is getting closer with the internet, I think like with the globalization, the language is really important aspect in health communication anywhere you go. And,
Absolutely.
we really don't know if someone is living in a different country. while working for a company in the United States. And actually, that's what my brother is doing.
Oh,
He
wow.
works for company in United States, but he lives in South Korea. So this language barrier
Sure.
that we think it's, the barrier issues that we think it's just a local issues in the United States, it is not. And it doesn't, it'll increasingly more will become um, global issues for anyone. Um, let's say you are going to South Korea. How would you communicate your healthcare issues, right?
Sure.
Mostly they speak Korean. There's even if some people speak English, it'll be very limited. So, all these things that we talk about in language barriers and cultural nuances affect globally. And I have a publication called IMGs um, that I feature patient stories in any
Excellent.
language. We accept stories in any language, and I have some editors who can translate the stories that we get accept we receive. And one gentleman, he's American, so he wrote his story in English, so there was no need for translation. He performed he got surgery in Italy, and he you know explained his story.
Hmm.
And because of the language barrier, I don't think he was able to really go in detail on like his preferences. And he just had to accept whatever was being given without really questioning.
Hmm.
And I mean, thank God he's safe and alive. But just imagine that kind of situation
Sure.
where you are in a foreign country where the language is different and how scary that could be. They're gonna operate on you. You're gonna be
Absolutely.
yeah, under the anesthetic. So there's a lot of things that can come into play, and that we don't necessarily think about right now, but
Absolutely.
but in very near future, I see that it's going to be a table topic, you know.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
You have this March coming up next month, which is this month almost.
Mhm.
Tell us more about that, if you
Yeah,
would.
so this is I believe it's the third, oh no, it's actually the fifth year. 2021, 2020. Actually, it's the fourth year, I believe. Fourth year of marching. And the World Health Organization has um, designated September 17th as World Patient Safety Day
Excellent.
in 2019. And they released the Global Patient Safety Action Plan 2021 to 2030 in the year 2020. And we wanted to, make this day as a day to highlight the importance of patient safety in healthcare.
Excellent.
And we've been doing this march for years, and this is our fourth year of doing the march in Washington, D.C.
Well,
So it's going to be at Freedom Plaza, and we expect about 50 people to show up. I think year by year it's been kind of increasing steadily, but I think the role that we play is to bring all healthcare organizations and safety organizations, like patient safety organizations, together. So, like last year, there were people from National Quality Forum, Ariadne Labs, MedStar, local hospital in Washington, D.C. And of course, we were there. And this year, it's going to be more. There's going to be more governmental folks joining us from CMS, AHRQ. So year by year, we are increasing our bandwidth and people who will be participating with us. So I'm quite excited about it. It's my first year going.
Excellent.
When I was doing the local walk with former Patient Safety Movement Foundation CEO David Mayer, he actually walked all over the United States. He visited, he's a baseball fan, so he visited baseball stadiums all over the United States. He kind of made that like a fun walk as he's walking and advocating for patient safety. And I joined him when was it 2020 and 2021? So we walked in Milwaukee area and also in Chicago area to advocate for patient safety. And I also did
Did you go
my
to the
own.
baseball games?
No, because this was during COVID. So I was
Got
I
it.
was planning March
Sure,
in Chicago area, and then that there's COVID. So
sure.
I decided to just do it by myself, and I just walked from hospital to hospital around my area,
Wow.
and I was able to donate some money to
Wow.
the cause.
Good for you.
And David Mayer came to this area as well, so we walked together when he was in town.
That's
And
great.
that was and he also published a book about the whole journey he had.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
So tell us about a couple of things that you would like people to take away with regards to patient safety and health literacy from your standpoint.
Yeah, so I want people to remember their lives matter, and you do have control over how the care is given and received.
That's
And
great. That's a good message.
and yeah, even with the language barriers, it is difficult, but I believe it is possible. But you do need to speak up for yourself. You do need to be able to speak up for yourself. And when you can't, I highlight the importance of having an advocate, even if it's a family member, friend. But if you don't have such person, there are advocates you can hire. And I have a friend who has established an organization. It's a directory of advocates. It's called Greater National Advocates. He built a website that lists all the advocates all over the United States, and you can enter your zip code, your needs, and it'll match with the advocates you can call.
That's great.
He believes in this mission because he himself lost his limbs and because of a medical error at a hospital. And he's a lawyer.
Wow.
So of course, he was able to advocate for himself after the event, but during the event, when he was in coma, he couldn't, right? So he stresses, what if he had an advocate who knew the medical field,
sure,
and able to determine what's needed.
No, that's a great example.
Yeah, he totally believes in that mission. So he's someone that I admire very much. His name is Brett Schwartz, and I highly recommend checking out his website.
Great. Well, it's been a tremendous pleasure learning about what you do, what your organization does, and how it hopefully will help us in our mission to improve health literacy. So I want to thank you very much for coming today, and I want to wish you all the best personally and professionally.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome.